The Denver Broncos going into the 2019 NFL season, they don't have much in terms of expectations. And I'm not necessarily picking them to make the playoffs or win the AFC West, but I do believe that the Denver Broncos are going to be much better than people expect, and I do think they are going to be a problem. I think the Denver Broncos are one of those teams that you don't necessarily circle on your calendar, on your schedule, but you don't want to have them on your schedule. They have a veteran quarterback. They have a new head coach who wants to prove that he belongs at this head coach level after being a defensive coordinator, one of the best for a very long time. They have more playmakers on the offensive side of the ball than many people do think, and they have a very tough defense. The Denver Broncos, in my opinion, are going to be a problem in 2019, and this is why. Gronk, spike the like button, subscribe to The Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this, and comment below your expectations for the Denver Broncos in 2019. Do you see them as a playoff team? Do you see them surprising people? Or do you think the Broncos will be very much like the 2018 version of the football team? The first reason why I believe the Broncos will be a problem to play in 2019 is they've upgraded their head coach. Vic Fangio knows how to coach football. He's been around the NFL longer than most head coaches out there. And I understand he doesn't have a lot of experience running a football team and being the head guy. But trust me, he knows what he wants out of his football team. And he's a much better coach than Vance Joseph. To me, Vance Joseph was arguably the worst coach in all of football. And by statistic, by his win-loss record, he was actually the worst Broncos head coach since 1970. So you can't really get worse than what Vance Joseph brought the Broncos as a head coach. Vic Fangio will be better, I promise you. And the one main reason is because I didn't really understand why Vance Joseph was hired. His expertise is defense, but his defensive philosophy, the way that he runs his defense, didn't match with the personnel of what the Broncos offer. I expected more a defensive coach to get the best out of the 2015 dominant Broncos defense. I believe Vic Fangio's 2019 Broncos defense could be the best we've seen in Denver since 2015. Vic Fangio, on his resume, he offers 5 top 3 ranked defenses over the course of his career, whether that was in Carolina, Houston, San Francisco, or Chicago. You look at his recent resume with what he's done with San Francisco and Chicago, and over the years there, he had 2 of the most dominant defenses we've seen of this decade. So Vic Fangio certainly understands modern offenses, how to attack them, how to stop them. And many NFL players actually believe Vic Fangio's defenses are the most difficult to play against. I would say he's definitely a top 5 defensive mind in football, and he will bring an attacking 3-4 style that suits the personnel in Denver. Now, the biggest question mark with the Denver Broncos going into 2019 is the question mark that they've had for the past 3 seasons without Peyton Manning. I believe Joe Flacco is an upgrade over what they've had. I believe at least Joe Flacco brings a calming presence. He brings a guy that has experience. He brings a quarterback that understands what it's like to play with a great defense, understands what it's like to win football games, and understands what it's like to play with a defensive-oriented head coach. I believe Joe Flacco was a great choice for the Broncos. Not only do I believe that Joe Flacco was a great choice, but I also believe he was kind of an under-the-radar choice, and I don't think he's getting enough hype or credit for what he could bring the Broncos this season. Now, I'm not the biggest Joe Flacco fan in the world, but as a Patriot fan myself, I've seen Joe Flacco go to New England and beat the Patriots. I've seen him go down to the wire in shootouts with Tom Brady. So Joe Flacco certainly has the balls to win you games, and he certainly understands what it's like to play in the biggest games there are and win them. So Joe Flacco is a leader. Joe Flacco is what you want at the quarterback position. But from a physical standpoint is where people are questioning him. Is he the same quarterback that he used to be maybe in 2012 and 2014? Can he still zip the ball like he used to? I actually think Joe Flacco had his best season last year than the last couple of seasons. I mean, Joe Flacco actually was playing pretty well early that season in 2018. When you take a look at what he did, he was 4-5 as a starter last season. But he was 4-2 to start the season. And when you take a look at those losses, he lost to Cam Newton's Panthers, he lost to the Steelers, he lost to the New Orleans Saints, which was only, I believe, by 1 point. He actually played pretty well in a few of those games. And you have to remember that this team, the Ravens, were switching to a more run-oriented offense. They were switching to an offense that was tailor-made for Lamar Jackson, not Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco was not in their future plans. He was kind of a placeholder for Lamar Jackson. Joe Flacco didn't have a great receiving group. He didn't really have even a great running game. And his offensive line was okay. And definitely the scheme was not centered around Joe Flacco and what he can do in terms of throwing the ball down the field. I believe this is the best scheme that gets the most out of Joe Flacco's skill set. They're bringing in more of a West Coast-oriented style in Denver. They have Rich Scangarello, who formerly was the 49ers quarterback coach and has worked under Kyle Shanahan in his career. He's bringing the Mike Shanahan Broncos offense back. The fascinating part of this and the calculated signing of Joe Flacco was that, hey, Joe Flacco, his best season ever was with Gary Kubiak, who also runs the same system as Mike Shanahan and Rich Scangarello. So that being said, Joe Flacco should be comfortable in this offense, which he said he is. He should feel a lot of confidence in this offense. It also gets the most out of his kind of under-the-radar mobility, his ability to throw the ball down the field and on the run. That's when he's been at his best with the West Coast system, which the Broncos will be running in 2019. Joe Flacco will have something that he didn't have in Baltimore. He will have two running backs that are very talented, very young, and are two totally different styles of runners that are really going to take a ton of pressure off of Joe Flacco. You have Phillip Lindsay. Phillip Lindsay is more of the slasher. He's the speed guy. To me, he's one of the most explosive backs in the league, and I was super impressed by his rookie season. He's already become one of my favorite running backs in the game. And Royce Freeman, who a lot of people are sleeping on, he's more of the power back. He's pretty good at making guys miss and breaking tackles, and those two combine for one of the best running back duos in football. And if they can grow as players in their second season, then that's totally going to help Joe Flacco. Who was Joe Flacco's running back last season? Gus the Bus? Alex Collins? I don't think either of those guys are nearly as talented as what the Broncos have at the running back position. Outside of the running backs, the Broncos actually have an underrated group of receivers, whether it's at the wide receiver position with a returning Emmanuel Sanders who looked awesome last year and to me has been one of the more underrated receivers in football for many years. I love Emmanuel Sanders. He's one of the best route runners in the game. He's one of the quickest guys, and he's just very difficult to handle in man-to-man. Courtland Sutton's a young, promising outside wide receiver, a little bit bigger than an Emmanuel Sanders, and he could help out. If he can take a step forward, that'd be very nice for Joe Flacco's sake as well as the Broncos' sake. And then you look at Deshaun Hamilton, who I was pretty high coming out of the draft last season. He can be a pretty nice slot receiver for the Broncos. So if those two young guys, along with Emmanuel Sanders, can create some sort of chemistry and those young guys can take a step forward with Joe Flacco, I think that's a better receiving core than what he had in Baltimore. And he definitely did not have a guy like Emmanuel Sanders with the Ravens. The tight end position, you add a first-round talent in Noah Fant from every measurable, is an absolute monster from an athletic perspective, and he's shown a little bit in the preseason. I think he's definitely going to play a lot of the snaps at the tight end position, but they have pretty good depth at that position as well with another young guy like Jake Butt. The Broncos have more receiving options than what Joe Flacco has had in quite a few seasons, to be honest, in Baltimore, and the offensive line is quietly the best Broncos offensive line they've had in a couple of seasons. The Broncos spent a lot of money and investment in the offensive line this offseason and last offseason. Last offseason, they brought in Ronald Leary, who is their right guard, James at right tackle from the Miami Dolphins, who's one of the better right tackles in the game and will shore up that right side. You're moving former guard McGovern to center now, and left guard Reisner is a rookie who they spent a pretty high draft pick on him as well. And left tackle is Garrett Bowles, who you spent a high draft pick a couple of seasons ago on. So the Broncos have a pretty talented offensive line, one that's had a lot of money spent on it, a lot of investment, a lot of high draft picks, a lot of capital on that offensive line. And if they can open up holes for Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman and protect Joe Flacco, then it will be well worth the investment. Now switching to the exciting part of the Broncos. And usually for most NFL teams, the exciting part is the offense. But for the Broncos, it's the defense. I think this defense can be killer this season. I think they are going to be an elite unit. When you take a look at what Vic Fangio loves on a defense, that's edge rushers, that's big people up front, that's corners and flexible, versatile defensive backs. That's exactly what the Broncos have. And Fangio made it a point to go out and add a couple of pieces to this defense this offseason. Looking up front at the defensive line, I think they have one of the more underrated interior groups in the league with Derek Wolfe, who's well established in this league, but kind of slept on as a good NFL starter. I'm not going to say he's a Pro Bowler, an All-Pro. He's been in that conversation in the past, but he's just a very good player. Shelby Harris is one of the best run-stuffing nose tackles in the game. This defensive line is beefy. It's big, and it's going to be difficult to move, difficult to handle, and definitely difficult to run against. And I already talked about how dominant Von Miller and Bradley Chubb potentially could be within this defense. Not to mention, Bradley Chubb was a rookie last year. He's going to get better. He's going to be even better than the double-digit sack guy he was. Both of these players are great as pass rushers, but also excellent against the run. They set the edge. They're just difficult players. And Von Miller has been phenomenal his entire career. He is a guy that you constantly have to game plan for, and it's going to be amazing to watch Vic Fangio utilize his skill set the same way he utilized Khalil Mack, but maybe even a little bit differently because they are different players with different skill sets. I do believe that he could use Chubb in a similar way that he did utilize Khalil Mack because there's kind of a little bit of similarity there in their skill sets. You throw into the edge position a young, up-and-coming player like Malik Reed, who Von Miller has gone out of his way to praise and call him the dream killer because he's killing the dreams of quarterbacks out there. This edge position is one of the best in the game and definitely going to be even better this season with the coaching of Vic Fangio. The linebacker position, the inside linebacker position, you have Josie Jewell, who's expected to make a jump this season. He's still a very young player. Todd Davis is a solid guy, nothing special. And then you throw in a guy like Sua Cravens, who's not really a linebacker. He's actually listed as a safety, but I could see him as well playing on like third down and long in obvious passing situations. He could definitely jump in there as a former linebacker himself. The secondary is what really completes this defense because in today's NFL, it's even more important to work from back to front when you're talking about your defense. That's the way that really the best minds in the defensive side of the football have built their defenses. When you look at Martindale in Baltimore, or Belichick in New England, or Fangio in Denver, He wants versatile defensive backs who can play man-to-man, who can play zone, who are very smart, and can handle all the different schemes and types of coverages that he wants to throw at these offenses. So when you take a look at the corner position, Chris Harris has been one of the best corners for more than a few seasons now, and he's coming off an injury, but I expect him to still be close to an elite level. Bryce Callahan was one of the most underrated signings this offseason as one of the best slot corners in football last year. The safety position, and Kareem Jackson is a safety and a corner. I could see Kareem Jackson playing slot corner in the nickel defense potentially, with Chris Harris playing outside and Callahan playing on the outside as well. I could also see Jackson moving to the outside. Like, the thing about Jackson is he can play corner, outside, inside. He can play safety as well. Callahan is a slot corner, but also could play on the outside. And Chris Harris, we've seen in a lot of matchups against guys like Edelman, for example, has lined up outside, but also lined up in the slot, basically matching the elite receiver on an opposing team. So these three guys are really the chess pieces for the defense, and how Fangio uses them is going to be the most interesting part about their defense. And you throw in Justin Simmons, who's a promising young player as well. I think he's just steadily gotten better over the past couple of seasons, and I expect that to take a step forward this year. We've seen Fangio really get a lot out of guys like Adrian Amos and Eddie Jackson, and maybe Simmons can be the next guy on that list. The Broncos may not be a playoff team. They may not be a team that many people are circling on their calendar, but the Broncos will be a problem in 2019. Gronk, spike the like button, subscribe to The Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this. I hope you guys enjoyed. Comment below your opinion on the Broncos. Did it change after this video, or does it stay the same? It's been Mitch at The Bottom Line View. Thanks for watching. Peace out.